So, what does Jesus want? And I believe this because it's what he said. Jesus wants faithful disciples or followers of Christ that make more faithful disciples or followers of Christ. Pretty simple, right? Jesus wants disciples that will follow him and then go out and make more disciples. So, turn to Matthew chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22. And so, you know, a lot of times we'll preach messages and then we move on to the next subject or the next topic. And this happens in churches all across the country, right? We have these different messages. And this is what I did in our youth Bible study. We talked about all of these different things. And it was good that we're increasing in our knowledge, right? And even some of them actually trying to apply the knowledge that they... But I never did any training to help them share what they learned. I would tell them to, but they never watched me do it. We never practiced in class sharing our testimonies to each other or sharing the gospel with a friend. No training. You know, the biggest revelation that came to me from this DeVos training, I went through 15 months of intense training. The biggest revelation that came to me is I have to go from being the doer to the trainer. I have to stop being the guy that always does and start being the guy that trains others to do and equips them to train others to do so they can equip the others to train others to do. And you see how early on, after the death of Christ, the church could explode. The growth would just... This is what I want to see happen in my hometown. So Matthew chapter 22, starting in verse 34. And so when we talk about a simple church, this is what it's so simple. This is what it's talking about. Matthew chapter 22, starting at verse 34, and it says this. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Asked Jesus a question. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. All right. Another one says with all your strength. Verse 38. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Now, I know we know these scriptures, right? We know these scriptures, right? So if Jesus says everything else hinges on these two, you do these two, you're in good shape. So then for the simple church, if there's think of a triangle, right? For the simple church, to love God and then to love others, right? And we talk about this. You might see a shirt that says this, love God, love people, right? Love God, love others, right? But there's a third component here. Turn to Matthew 28. I know we all know this. We'll jump and move, but before we move, let's begin to practice. Let's begin to practice to apply what we know. And as we apply it, then let's share that information with others. So, Matthew 28, you know where I'm going, verse 18. Jesus says, now the 11 disciples went to Galilee to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, I'm starting at verse 16. They worshiped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Jesus says, nobody has power over me. Nobody. You've witnessed some of that, right? And the fact that I spoke to a storm and Mother Nature listened to me. And the fact that while you guys was fishing, right, I told you cast your net to the other side and all these fish jumped in your net so much that another boat had to come out and help you get it all back and y'all still almost sank. You saw me raise the dead. You saw me feed 5,000 plus women and children, 4,000 plus women and children. You saw me die at the cross. You saw my body go into the tomb. You know I was dead. Your heart was broken, but yo, here I am. So I have all authority. Nothing has power over me. That's what he says. And then look, verse 19. Because of that, go. What if we became the church, instead of people going to the church, that we, the church, go to the people? What would it look like to be the church that goes? He says, go, therefore, and make disciples